before we get a little deeper into that, could you tell me maybe kind of spell out some of the models that you found to be the most successful?
Yeah, and the ones that work really well at launch, and I'll contrast them to the ones that only work at scale.
And that's an interesting thing as well. If you could talk about that idea that some business models are great to begin with, but might not be the best for when you're kind of growing out your business.
Yeah, so some of the most obvious are commerce, right? So when you're selling somebody else's product at a margin, think Amazon, or Amazon early days before they became a marketplace. So from a commerce perspective, your key metrics on commerce is what's your average basket size, what's your gross margin, and how many transactions you're going to do a month. So you're able to look at your KPIs and go, is the business growing, or is it flat, or is it going down? But commerce is one of those that's super easy, right? It's pretty easy to calculate the economics for. Services have bill rates and pay rates. So if you think services, it's engineering would be a great example of somebody doing billable work. I have a pay rate, which is what I'm going to pay Dave to do the work. And I have a bill rate, which is what I'm going to charge Dave to deliver to the customer. So the customer is going to pay me $100 an hour, and I'm going to pay Dave $50 an hour, and I have a 50% gross margin.
Yeah.
So and then you get into subscriptions and what's called metered services, which is the only new one in that 5-year span. So subscriptions are pretty easy. It's Spotify as an example, and Salesforce on a B2B example. But if you think about this on a 4-quadrant box, I have B2B and B2C on the top, and I have products and services on the side. So if I'm a product company, I can make money when I sleep, right? So somebody can buy the product. If I'm a service company, for every new customer I add, I have to add people. So that's the difference between a service business and a product business, but it's also the difference between business to business, Salesforce, and business to consumer, like Spotify.
Yeah.
So, and investors kind of look at it that way and say, I invest in these sort of things. Like I like B2B commerce, or I like B2B subscriptions. The challenge with subscriptions, as you well know, is that it's hard to track I'm going to spend $100,000 and get 3 engineers, and we're going to build this, or $1 million. Doesn't really matter what the number is. But now I'm going to take payment on a monthly basis of $199 a month. So I've got $1 million in development costs, which I amortize over 3 years. And I have subscriptions. So my very first customer is basically the most expensive customer there, and they're not going to pay me $1 million. They're going to pay me $200 a month. So, but the thing that I love about that business is if it really works well, then 1,000 people will pay you $200 a month. And now I can calculate what's called sales efficiency, how long it took me to build a product, sell the customer until I get positive return on that customer sale. So it's harder to calculate because the math isn't as simple as hours, right, and pay rate and bill rate. But it also scales dramatically where services just don't scale dramatically. So subscriptions is one of them. Metered service is the next one. So metered service, think Twilio, think AWS or Azure, right? Which is, it started as a subscription service, but the more you use, the more you pay.
Yeah, so it's a tiered approach. Yeah.
In the last 5 years of watching it, there was one called Coins and Tokens, but ultimately, if there's no way to track a metric, right, and a conversion metric, or the answer was, well, both the SEC said, hey, you can't do that, and there was no metrics to track it. So though I had it in there initially, we ended up pulling it out for the book because it was like, So you see on the blog post I'll send you, it'll say the 16 models because Google's already indexed that site super high. But if you search for startup revenue models, you'll come up with, I think my blog post will be first or second, depending on the day. So, and then they start to get more complex. So for example, with marketplaces, a marketplace is a distinct revenue model. I have buyers and sellers. I have to have key metrics on both sides. There's a cost of acquiring sellers to get inventory so that as I acquire buyers, I can connect them and take a transaction fee. So revenue, that's one as well. There's one called productize a service. And the idea of productizing the service is we can automate the front end of the sales process where we have lifetime value and cost of customer acquisition. And then I can SKU up and sell a product as a fixed price. And people are in charge of making that product work. But the customer doesn't care how many hours or how many people or how much the process is. So by productizing a service, I can use the automation of customer acquisition that most tech companies use, but I can also use tools and tech in the back end to help me deliver those and keep margins high while we face downward price pressure.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, yeah, I'm talking to a founder right now who's doing something very similar in the pricing world.